Hi, in this video today, we're going to be speaking about work-life balance. Recently, someone asked me the question, Colin, what do you believe or what do you think of the concept of work-life balance in general and in terms of running and operating a small business? Is there such thing as work-life balance? And I thought about it, and I must admit that my initial and gut reaction is that it is the wrong question to ask. So I do not think that the question should be, is there such a thing as work-life balance? And should we be seeking work-life balance? I think it's the wrong question. So when I think of work-life balance and when I hear people talk about achieving work-life balance in their lives, I often wonder, what exactly does that mean? What is it you're trying to achieve? And so when I speak to other people, normally what comes out is trying to balance the demands of a career or your work with other aspects of your life. Again, it's trying to balance the demands of your work or career with other aspects of your life. And I've never heard anyone up to this point discuss work-life balance except when it comes to actual careers and how that affects one's life. I've not heard anyone discuss balance, a balanced lifestyle, when it comes to education, or I have not heard anyone discuss having a balanced lifestyle when it comes to volunteering at church. It always seems to be, it's what's my career and how is my career affecting all the other things that I do in my life, and I need to find a happy medium, so I need work-life balance. And so again, I believe that it's the wrong question we're asking, whether or not we can achieve work-life balance. I think, and this is my opinion, that instead of work-life balance or looking for balance in our lives, what about if we think of our life prioritization? What are we prioritizing in our life at any particular moment? For instance, when I think of about education, from the time you are 5 and you enter kindergarten in school, barring any jarring life events, you're pretty much going to school from the age of 5. If you grow up in the Caribbean, up to the age of 16. If you grow up in the United States or Canada, then I'm assuming it's up to age 18. And so depending on where in the world you're at, you're going to spend a significant amount of your time as in school from the age of 5. And yet no one ever asks a question about schooling and balance in the rest of your life. How is my schooling affecting the rest of my life? And there are a lot of kids that do not want to go to school. There are a lot of kids who couldn't care less about formal education, but yet it's forced upon us, it's forced upon them to go and get that formal education because of what is perceived as, hey, it is your key or catalyst to a better career, the ability to earn a living, the ability to get rich, the ability to be wealthy. And so you're primed and prepped to go to school for as long as you want to. Let's take it even further. At the end of your high school career, where there was no work-life balance, where there wasn't any schooling and life balance, you go on to college, and if you're going to be a good student, what is expected of you is that you're going to spend significant amount of your time studying, doing the homework, going to class, and all the things that a good college student would do for an additional 4 years. And you don't worry about balance. And in all these examples so far, what you worry about is you're prioritizing your education. And so from the age of 5 to the age of now 22, 24, you're prioritizing getting an education with the hopes that at the end of this education cycle, then I could get a career. And right at that point you get a career, the question becomes work-life balance. I'm not sure about that. All right, let's take it a little further. At the end of your bachelor's degree, you may decide to get a master's or a PhD. You may decide to go on to law school. You may decide to become a specialist in some medical field. And so we're talking now anywhere for another 2, 4, 8 years. So by the time you're in your late 20s, early 30s, you're still doing education. So from the age of 5 to your late 20s, to 30s, your focus is on education. Where is the balance? And so that is my point, is that it's not so much work-life balance or education balance or anything unbalanced. It's what's the prioritization? What is the priority at that point? Because for the person who is not interested in school, or he finishes school because it was mandatory, he couldn't care less about going on and getting another degree. He wants to do something else, and so his focus shifts to something else. All right? But until you enter the workforce, no one is concerned about balance in your life. And so my argument is this, that let us shift the discussion from work-life balance to prioritization. What are we prioritizing in our life at this particular time? So several years ago, I was in Nashville, and for a Sunday for a midweek service, I stepped into a church service. The church was close to my business, and so for the 7:30 service, and I came straight from my business and I went to service. And the assistant pastor at that time was, for his sermon, was preaching about balance and volunteering in the church. And he was making the point, and he said that sometimes people feel guilty because they could no longer volunteer in the church as much as they had in the past. And he was trying to make the point that, hey, do not feel guilty. It depends on where you are at in your life. And he went to the scripture, I think it was Ecclesiastes chapter 3, that talks about there is a time and a season for everything under heaven. And so he drew the example that says, hey, if you're a young mother or a mother with young kids, well, your focus, and you want your focus to be on your kids in those years, then you may decide to step back from volunteering at church, or simply give it up and make your family, those young kids, your focus. And so they become your priority. He says, you may be a new wife or new husband, and you may want to spend that time focusing on building a strong marriage. And he says, well, your focus then should be on that. Do not feel guilty about stepping back from church activity. And I agreed with him. And so I can take that same principle that says, okay, if you're building a business, you may need to take those first 4 or 5 years and the same attitude that you had towards your schooling and making sure you got good grades in preparation for your work life, you may now take that same discipline, that same prioritization, and apply that same focus, and apply that to building your business. And there is nothing wrong with that. And in prioritizing that, now it may mean that instead of doing 8 hours per day, you may need to do 10 hours per day. Instead of doing 10 hours per day of work, you may need to do 12 hours per day of work. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not doing any other thing, but just as if you were in school, you may choose to prioritize getting that work done so that your business would have a fair chance of succeeding. Because if you do not, the alternative is that your business may fail. Again, the statistics are well known that most businesses in the United States do not make it past 5 years for one reason or another. And in my opinion, sometimes I think what happens is people, we start a business and we get enamored with the fact that we are our own boss. We set our own schedule, we set our own time, and we do not show up on time, and we do not stay to finish projects. And you may be the only one working in that business. Well, if you are, your livelihood depends on you completing a project. Your livelihood depends on you understanding your deliverables. And so if you're going to leave early because you're now your own boss, well, your business is going to close early because you did not put the time in. And so, again, for me, it's about discipline and prioritization. So it's not about a work-life balance, it's about what's the priority. It does not mean you cannot take a vacation. It does not mean that you can't have regular 8-hour work days. It does not mean you can't take a half day off. But it means that your focus should be on what do I need to get done in business so that I can stay in business. And that applies not only if you're a business owner, but even if you're starting your career. Again, I go back that you're in school and your whole focus is doing well, and you're prioritizing schooling so that you can do well to get the job you want. And then you get the job you want, and then you say, oh, I need to step back and get some balance. Now, I believe that should be the time that you should lean in and make some significant contribution in that job so that you can be promoted faster than the other guy. It's a competition. And we keep forgetting that work is competition. Somewhere along the line, we have become enabled and forget that work is competition. Business is competition. And if you cannot compete, then you should not start a business. If you're not ambitious, then you should not start a business. If you're concerned about making sure that you are home after 4 hours, then you probably should not start a business. Now, I must admit that I've read the book, I think his name is Timothy Harris, I hope I'm not wrong, that talks about the 4-hour work week. I must admit, as a business owner, I am not there yet. I have not yet mastered the 4-hour work week. Now, I'm trying, but I'm not there yet. I'm still doing 8 and 10 hours per day, prioritizing getting our projects out on time so that we can keep our customers coming back. All right, so I'm not there yet, but for those of you who are, my hat's off to you. But for those of you who are getting started or you're in business and you need a mindset shift, it's about prioritization, not work-life balance. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, I interviewed a young lady who was just graduating from college, and she was excited about looking at a job and interviewing. But in the interview, she began to ask me about how flexible we are. What about our ideas, and what were my ideas on work-life balance? And I listened, and then she began to tell me about all the activities in theater and everything else that she was involved in and how these were important to her. And I nodded my head. I'm like, well, that's great. I like to play music. And so part of my relief is to play music, play the guitar, and have fun doing it. And so I said, hey, I understand that. But the more we interviewed, the more I realized that everything that she did outside of work was the priority. And it almost felt that work was not as important. And so that for me became a red flag. Not that she couldn't have been. Now, before we could make a decision, she removed herself and said that she already accepted another position. But as a business owner, as a small business owner, for me, I was hesitant because I was like, whoa. She's talking more about all the other things that she was doing outside of work itself. And I realized then that she didn't have a whole lot of questions about what we were doing. She spent a lot of time telling me about her interest outside of what we were hiring her for. And so that for me as a business owner sort of raised some red flags. Not because I was not interested in what they wanted to do outside of work, but I realized that there was not going to be much flexibility in working in the business. And so as a small business owner, I like to ask this question. What happens that it's 4:30 and we have a customer that we need to get a project out, and for some reason we're running late? The project is due today, but we are not going to meet the 5 o'clock deadline. But if we stay, we can get the project out by 6:30. What happens if everyone has to leave before the project is done? We still have a business to run. If all the employees decide, hey, I just have to leave. Now, I'm not talking about having an emergency. I understand, and most business owners would understand, emergencies take priority. But when there's a project that needs to be completed and your work day is at an end, and you're saying, I cannot stay the extra hour, I cannot stay the extra 30 minutes, even if you're being paid overtime, then that becomes a problem, because if you cannot fulfill the project demands, and you repeatedly cannot fulfill the project's demands, then you may not be able to fulfill the project. All right, and so if you can't, then you're in problem. You have a problem. So again, in summary, for me, it's not about work-life balance. It's about prioritizing what is necessary in your life, in this season of your life. Again, going back to the scripture, it says, there is a time and place for everything under heaven. If you're a small business owner, sometimes it may be this is the time to prioritize and focus and grow in your business. And that season may not just be a year, it may be 5 years, it may be 6 years. And you may need to make that commitment. It could be something else in your life that you need to do. Feel free, you have to do it and you should do it. All right? But it's all about the time and the seasons, and it's about focusing and prioritizing what is important to you. It's not excluding spending time with family and friends. It's not about exclusion. It's about prioritizing. Sometimes you may need to prioritize your friends. Sometimes you have to prioritize spending time, and your family is always prioritized. But if you're going to be a small business owner, if you're not prioritizing the work, at some point you're not going to be in business, and you're going to be one of those businesses that never made it past year 1 or year 2 or year 3. And it may not have anything to do with having capital. It may simply have to do with the fact that you did not prioritize getting the customers' projects out when you need it to. And so even in the best of businesses, when you're growing, it's always a struggle meeting the customer's demands. Now, if you add that and you compound that you have to leave right at the 5 o'clock hour as the business owner, you may have a problem. So again, the concept of work-life balance, I think it's the wrong question. I think it's the wrong phrase. I think it should be work-life prioritization. I think it should be work-life integration. How do I integrate everything I'm trying to do as opposed to balance what I'm trying to do? So if I'm integrating it, I'm making time to do it, because I'm going to prioritize all these things that I need to do, get them done, and then wrap my day up. One last example I can share. My son, one of my youngest son, was in football and he was in basketball, and it was my job to make sure I pick him up. So during the summers, sometime he may have, before he started driving, he would have football practice, in the morning, and then go back and have football practice again in the evening. And it was my duty to drop him off and pick him up. And then during games, whether it was basketball, football at the various points, I would have to drop him off to the various practices or the various games. And so instead of complaining, that I had to do this, I simply put it on my to-do list, just like everything else I had to do in that day. And so instead of having my day wrapped up at 5 o'clock, then I had my day wrapped up at 7 o'clock, because on that list was carry my son to basketball practice. And that was part of my work schedule. And I just integrated it into my whole day. 2 hours of practice from 7 to 9 or 6:30 to 7 to 8:30. Whatever time it was, that's what we did.